Hello, how are you? I'm Lilei. The book we're discussing today is one you've surely heard of, Don Quixote. It's such a fun book. Even if you haven't read the original, just hearing the name Don Quixote, you'll surely picture him in your mind. An wizened old man with a little beard, riding a skinny horse dressed in armor, holding a lance, charging at a huge spinning windmill. I will fight with the windmills, right? It's so amusing. This iconic image has undoubtedly made its mark in literary history. Don Quixote was born over 400 years ago, translated into over 100 languages, and stands as the most prestigious and influential work in Spanish literary history. Legend has it that King Philip III of Spain once saw a young man standing on a balcony of the palace, laughing uncontrollably while reading a book. The king remarked, "He must be reading Don Quixote, or else he is mad." Sure enough, the young man was reading Don Quixote. Today, when we read this novel, we too find ourselves laughing heartily. The story of Don Quixote is quite simple and can be summed up in a few sentences. An aging country gentleman, obsessed with chivalric romances, decides to become a knight-errant. With a burst of enthusiasm, he takes along a naive fellow townsman as his squire, imitates medieval knights, and embarks on adventures, and then gets himself into a series of ludicrous situations. But here's a question. If Don Quixote is merely a comic figure, how has this work endured for over 4 centuries and remained a classic? It wasn't until recent years that I understood the poet Byron's assessment of this book. He said, "Don Quixote is the saddest of all stories." Why? Because Don Quixote is a single-minded fool, relentlessly pursuing justice and the unwavering spirit of a knight. Thus, he is out of touch with reality, lacks flexibility, and is not scheming. His virtues, however, make him appear foolish and mad in the eyes of others, leading to his pitiful fate. Have you noticed how this world has an overabundance of clever people to the extent that we now find ourselves short of fools? As I came to understand Byron's viewpoint and reread this book honestly, I found myself laughing a little less joyfully. But there's something good about it. I now appreciate the value of being a fool, and I do mean that with quotation marks. Today, let's discuss this book and start with its author, Cervantes. He was a Spaniard, and his full name was Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra. Whatever his name is, you should know he's a world-renowned literary master. It's quite unfortunate, though, that during his lifetime, Cervantes was just a disabled soldier and a destitute writer who did not achieve high acclaim. He was born in 1547, and there's very little record about his early life. We only know that in 1569, he left Spain for Rome and, in the following year, joined the Spanish army stationed in Italy as an ordinary soldier. In 1571, he participated in the famous Battle of Lepanto, suffering wounds in 3 places, leaving his left hand permanently disabled, showing how much he desired to be a hero. In 1575, Cervantes was captured by pirates and spent 5 years as a slave in Algiers. This experience later became part of the first part of Don Quixote. During his captivity, Cervantes attempted 4 escapes with his fellow prisoners, all of which failed. Yet, he was remarkably brave and honorable. After each failure, he stood up to take full responsibility, refusing to betray his comrades, even at the risk of death. This courage and integrity impressed even the brutal pirates, sparing his life out of respect for his bravery. In 1580, Cervantes was finally ransomed and returned to his homeland, Spain. He was penniless and handicapped, unable to do much. In 1587, he secured a job of procuring supplies for the Spanish Armada, but was falsely accused of mishandling accounts and subsequently imprisoned. In 1594, Cervantes took up a post as a tax collector, but was accused of embezzlement and imprisoned once again. Hence, there's a saying that the first part of Don Quixote was penned by Cervantes while he was in jail. Cervantes' life was indeed quite dramatic. By this point, he had already lived over half his life. When was Don Quixote published? It was in 1605, when Cervantes was 58 years old, nearing 60. The work became an immediate success upon publication. Unfortunately, this did not improve Cervantes's financial situation, and he remained a poor man until his death. In 1615, the Archbishop of Spain visited the French ambassador. The ambassador's aide inquired about Cervantes, wondering how he was doing. The response was that Cervantes was old, a former soldier and minor country gentleman, and very poor. The aide was surprised and asked why Spain did not support the famous man financially. A clergyman responded that if Cervantes had written out of poverty, they hoped God would never let him become wealthy, as his poverty enriched everyone. This irony is hard to accept. It seems a writer must be poor. Regardless, the first part of Don Quixote was so successful that everyone knew Cervantes' name. Fake versions appeared, including bad sequels by others imitating Cervantes' style. Cervantes saw these and was furious. He quickly started writing the second part himself. The second part of Don Quixote was published in 1615. In this part, Cervantes mercilessly mocked and criticized those who imitated him. To prevent it from happening again, he killed Don Quixote in the end. He wrote the ending that Don Quixote died of illness at home, putting a termination to the character's life. After completing this work in the following year, 1616, Cervantes suffered severe edema and passed away on April 23rd, which happens to be World Book Day. His funeral was a quiet affair. He was hastily buried in a monastery cemetery in Madrid. It's said that besides his wife, hardly anyone attended his burial. Over 200 years later, Madrid erected a monument in his honor. It stands in a square in Madrid with statues of Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. This has become a famous Spanish landmark. As time passes, classics gain more recognition. A touching Spanish saying goes, "Even when everything seems lost, we still have Don Quixote." The German poet Heinrich Heine said he reread Don Quixote every 5 years. Each time he had a different impression of the novel. Like The Little Prince we discussed earlier, it remains ever fresh. At different ages, you'll have different feelings and understandings of it. That's the relationship between a classic and a person. It brings growth and changes in mindset. Let's return to Don Quixote, who was initially seen in Spain as a genuine madman, quite ridiculous. In literary circles, it was considered a comic story and a popular read. Spanish critics even said Cervantes was ignorant. Though talented, he only entertained. The label of ignorant and incompetent stuck with Cervantes for nearly 300 years. Therefore, for a long time, Don Quixote was underestimated. When did people realize its greatness? It started in England. There, Don Quixote was much better received, with writers and critics paying it considerable attention. One English novelist, Fielding, said most people are mad, differing from Don Quixote only in their type of madness. Based on Don Quixote, he wrote his own play, Don Quixote in England. In this play, Don Quixote tells Sancho Panza, "Let them call me mad. I'm not mad enough to win their approval." Yes, he's an innocent man unaffected by others' opinions. In their eyes, Don Quixote isn't just a target of ridicule, he becomes a critic of human nature and society. Many characters like Don Quixote appear in British literature.